So, following our podcast episode last week, Tanner and I kind of talked about OpenAI's new reasoning model, O1, which is a manifestation of Strawberry, which is purportedly the project that caused all of the kind of tumult in OpenAI when they fired Sam Altman and, their board of directors quit and everything like that.
Yeah, Ilya just disappeared.
Yeah, and now he's doing his own thing with SSI. But I just wanted to talk about, because, we did this podcast episode about O1, and like my reaction to it was mostly like, this is kind of meh, like we can already do this programmatically. And I was thinking about how that was the thing that, reportedly caused such a stir in OpenAI. And it seems, maybe a little overblown in retrospect. But it just got me kind of thinking about, because I think Ilya and a lot of academics are correct in their approach right now that like, hey, we should be cautious about the way that we're developing AI. We don't really know kind of the impacts on society. And, maybe we don't know exactly where to draw the line, because I think if O1 was like the scary thing, I think it was just like maybe a bit overblown. But anyways, just kind of wanted to talk about that, and how do we how is the current space kind of structured in terms of developing AI that benefits all people versus some smaller groups of empowered individuals, and how is that playing out? So Tanner, I'm curious on your thoughts.
I think the hype for sure is overblown, because there's a lot of companies who see a glimmer of something and they immediately assume, okay, it's going to be this. But there's a large delta between what is actually capable and what isn't, and what's actually going to happen. And they oftentimes make business decisions around that hype or that speculation that do negatively affect people. So we're starting to see that more and more as companies like Dell, or basically everybody. I mean, Elon Musk is probably the biggest one going to NVIDIA, just begging for H100s and whatever chips they can give them so they can build super clusters to do their own AI models. But they're spending all of this money on this hope with AI for this potential capability. And a lot of times they're not investing that into their people. And I think, Hunter, you and I have been talking a lot about what the implications are for that with software developers, for example, because already the market for hiring junior devs, cultivating new developers, and to be fair, who wants to learn how to code when you're not using AI in these systems? If you have all these high leverage tools, you want to be using those. You don't want to sit in some class that's forcing you to do, everything out in Notepad or something. But nonetheless, I think that AI hype right now is causing poor long-term business decisions. And I think that a lot of the speculation is also leading people to be more fearful than they need to be for these tools.
One of the things too that I think about, or like maybe my desire in kind of recording this podcast episode, is like, and I'll put this question to you, Devon, because my hunch is that you have a pretty put together answer. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm setting you up for failure there. But if your mother, right, your mom knows that we have
starting with my mother.
Yeah. If your mom, she knows that we have this company, right? She's a textiles and fabric production guru, but she's not an AI person, right? She knows that we have this company. She knows that you know something about AI, and she comes to you and she's like, Devon, I'm really scared about my grandkids' future because I think AI is going to destroy the world. Like, make me feel better about this, right? What would you say to her?
Oh man, I'm supposed to have a good answer for that.
Okay, maybe not, because I've been thinking about this a lot. But like,
I want to hear your answer. It sounds like you have a good answer.
I'll give my answer first. I think the thing that gives me hope, and I think the thing that I really respect about OpenAI, and I know that there's a lot of hate just because like anybody now that does anything noteworthy, it's just like negative press sponge because it's easy. you know? But the thing that I like about the direction of AI development that I've seen in the last 3-4 years is that everything, all the cutting edge tools that are being developed, I have access to all of them as soon as they exist, basically, for the most part. And then, like, I think as long as we're distributing these tools equally to everybody, that, like, you know, nuclear weapons were a really scary thing for the world. But, you know, as long as no
When
one
we gave
person,
them to everybody, they
yeah,
were good.
seriously, right? Like, the
Yeah, they're
problem,
not scary anymore.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, they're still scary, right? And that's the thing. We shouldn't be dismissive of AI. But, like, my point being that, like, I think as long as no one entity becomes, like, overpowered over everyone else, I think that AI is just going to be another piece of technology in our arsenal. And I think that the direction that I've seen with the industry uh, as of the last 2 years, or basically since OpenAI came to the scene, has been much more positive and, like, uplifting than it was prior to that, where you had, like, you know, Google DeepMind was the most advanced AI, you know, project in the world. And I think, like, you know, no shade to anyone that works at Google, but, like, I don't trust Google to be that leader and then, you know, appropriately distribute that power to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, is it going to be, you know, like the internet, is it going to be properly decentralized, even though the internet isn't perfectly decentralized? But, yeah.
I mean, even from, like, an economic perspective, right? Like, I think there's, like, the invisible hand is somewhere here in terms of, like, capabilities and making sure that we're not going to destroy ourselves as long as everybody has access to it. I don't know.
I think there's twofold. There is the equalizing effect that it has for users and people who utilize AI software, but there is a disproportionate control factor on the companies that own the platforms themselves.
Sure.
Because we're looking more and more now where compute is king. How much energy, you know, there's the memes talking about nuclear bombs, nuclear power plants needing to be near data centers to power these AI tools. We're seeing that the investment needed to be an actual player in the platforms is becoming more and more costly. And so it's coming down to just super players. And so I think there is a legitimate concern that if there's only a few players, then they are the gatekeepers to what is enabled. And there has been a lot of criticism of OpenAI bringing on board members, as like a former NSA leader is on there, and they're reportedly giving the government access to, you know, O1 before we get access to it to kind of validate it. And I completely understand from their perspective, because it just takes one negative PR event to completely derail you. Just look at TikTok right now, where if something happens, they might be gone, and they're trying to fight that in court, but that's a lot of money and a lot of headache. So, yeah, I mean, they're thinking about, like, what would you say to your mother? It's like, this is important. It is also happening significantly faster than any other technology that we've had before. But ultimately, just like technology before, our lives are significantly better. Even though in the moment we don't feel like it, just due to the hedonic treadmill, grass is always greener. But for as much as we romanticize the 50s, I wouldn't want to live in that era, because I like all the modern things I have now. Or I've been reading books on Greek and Roman antiquity, which is quite fun. Thanks to Lex Friedman, he brought his Roman historian on, so I've been reading his books. And for all the cool things you can think about, like, oh, it'd be neat to live there, they also only lived to be 30 because of disease, and their houses fell on them all the time.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, that's another topic in and of itself, because I'm not convinced that I wouldn't be happier as a hunter-gatherer like 1,000 years ago. Like, I read what's his face, Homo sapiens,
Yuval Hari.
Yes, about, like, the evolution of the human race, and we could get into all that. But to bring it back to, like,
Yeah,
I think you know, because there's criticism of OpenAI and everything that they do, and, like, again, it's just natural. It's a it's a negative sponge. It's a sponge for publicity one way or another. And in today's day and age, negative publicity tends to do better just because of the way it's distributed.
They're also a bit quirky. I mean, their whole story of being the nonprofit floating
Yeah, yeah,
around
yeah.
in profit.
And that's what I wanted to talk about too.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so let's say these advances in AI were going to get made, right? Let's say they were going to happen in this span of 5 years by somebody, right?
Mhm.
And OpenAI happened to be the one that was on the forefront, right? I'm having a hard time picturing like another player doing that I think would do it better. Like is OpenAI doing it perfectly? No. But that being said, like, okay, on the whole nonprofit thing, right? When they started that, there was a certain level of like hardware and ability to train large language models. And like people were only doing models. Like people forget that, GPT 3.5, which is the model that set the world on fire, was 3.5. So there was 1, 2, 3, and 3.5, right? So they founded OpenAI all the way back in 1. I don't know how much smaller it was in terms of like training data and things like that, how many nodes there were. But like, it takes $1 billion to build a model like that anymore, or like whatever. Like, I don't know what the actual figure is, but like the reality is that at the time, I don't think they conceived of the amount of resources or even like the possibilities in terms of how big it could go. And like, so they were like, let's just be a nonprofit and like do it that way. But like, I'm a huge capitalist because I think like capitalism provides opportunity for advancement that wouldn't occur in like a different system. And I think like this is a good case where they realized that like, if we make this a profit generating machine, it's going to be the most efficient that it possibly can be. And if we don't, we're not going to be able to compete. And like, if we're the ones that want to bring open AI to the world, which I think so far they've done a pretty passable job at, then like, I think we got to do it. And, I don't know, there's just not a lot of like understanding for that sort of nuance of the problem.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money. And Devon, I'd love to give your thoughts on this because I do agree that I don't know what player could have done it beforehand. Like Google had the technology, they wrote the papers, but they're just such a monolith, behemoth, slow moving, ship that they really don't innovate to the same degree that a startup can. And Sam Altman is probably one of the top founder, leader, think type person, being, living and breathing Y Combinator for so long. So it does take that startup breaking things mentality to do it. So Devon, what are your thoughts on them being the right people for the job to innovate in that way?
Well, I mean, Google's model has, traditionally been ads, and, ChatGPT doesn't have any ads. There's not a real great place to put ads in, the system. So obviously, it made sense that they weren't going to try to disrupt themselves as quick as they possibly could because they're making billions of dollars on that model. It's interesting that, these companies are investing, billions of dollars in research and billions of dollars in funding, and it's easy money to raise right now, but the revenues aren't great too as well. So what happens when, their investors start, more players come to the market and it starts becoming more of a capitalistic gain of like, all right, now we got to figure out a way to make money on that. And it's like, what does that become? I mean, now I can't even go on my Disney streaming plus without watching commercials, so, it's always that like loop around where they figure out, all right, we're going to, try to get the monopoly on the game. And then we're going to try to figure out how we can squeeze money out of our customers. And I agree with capitalism. The only thing, wrong with capitalism is if there are become monopolies or if you introduce negative externalities that the business doesn't have to pay for. So if, you're creating some sort of mental health issues or energy crisis, that is not being on the burden of the company because it's simply being passed off to the consumer, or the government is subsidizing it, or the energy company is subsidizing
or the
it
environment,
but or the environment
negative
is
impact to the environment,
just taking a hit on it too as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure it's how it's going to play out, but there's
yeah, and
it could be greater.
We've heard those. I mean, that's kind of like a undercurrent fear right now is like, and Samuel, who we had on the podcast several episodes back, he pointed that out too, that like the profit margins on these current, large language model tools is like they're losing money, right? So they're essentially subsidizing their own, customer growth. And that is like something to pay attention to, is like, is this going to be the Uber Eats of AI, where like initially it's really cheap and they get all this like, buy-in and different systems built on top of it and habits and whatever, and then they're going to jack the price unreasonably. But that being said, like, I think there is something to be said for, to OpenAI's credit, because like there's always that possibility, certainly. And it's like, you can't prove a negative. So like they can't basically say anything to prove that they're not going to do that, other than saying that they're not going to do that. And Devon's a really big fan of, you can't predict behavior by what people say they're going to do. You can predict it by what they've done in the past and what they hate. And what OpenAI has done in the past, and like, up to today, every single model that they've come out with, they have made it more capable and faster and cheaper. Right. So like, yeah, that might be a bait and switch sort of market penetration play, where it's like, we'll put this out there, we'll get all these applications built on top of it. Like, we'll make ourselves so irreplaceable that then we can charge whatever we want, and then we'll jack it up 5 times, 10 times. And yeah, that could happen, but like, so far they haven't. And
I saw a stat where, or I don't know if it was a stat, but I saw where they were talking about all of the returns in the AI industry right now. Over 100% has gone to NVIDIA. So if you look at the actual like total costs and where the money's flowing, like most businesses that are dealing with AI are in the red, like they're negative on their investments, and NVIDIA is the only one who's just like reaping all of that in. So one, I thought that was interesting. But from the mindset of like gaining market share and doing those things, if the goal is to build an artificial general intelligence or an artificial super intelligence, there is that mindset that it's a winner take all game, that the first person or the first company to get there will get all of the rewards. And so that is kind of a little bit of the game that's being played, at least speculation wise. So that's something to factor in as well. I doubt it's the Uber being, financed by venture money and just going for growth and acquisition and then once they get dominance, then your delivery fee goes all of a sudden to like $20. So it just becomes not economically feasible. But there is a race happening, which is interesting in the AI space. And it's who can build the best models, who can gain, that general intelligence, who can get that foothold.
The other thing too, and Devon, if you have anything on, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I tell this story all the time and it's a good story, but it's similar with restaurants. You have there's so many restaurants around the world, and you have these mom and pops that are like working to the bone, like working harder than any of us have ever worked, except maybe Hunter, because Hunter just works 24 hours a day. But and they don't make a lot of money because it's a crowded space. But then you have these companies like the Ciscos, the people that provide, to these, saturated markets, and they are just, printing out cash in the billions. And so it's like, yeah, if it's going to be a crowded market, it's going to be the people that are, supplying into that crowded market that are really going to, make the money.
Selling shovels and blue jeans.
Shovels in it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like, okay, along those lines, when we talk about cost, and we were talking about this the other day, right? Because like, we as a company are, we're not necessarily tied to one AI model or another, and like if it fails, like it would impact our product offerings. But we are a company that we're leveraging the benefits of generative AI in a very specific and sophisticated and targeted way. Um, and so we're talking about that because it's like we do rely on generative AI to do some of the things that we do. As a smart business, like we're always trying to evaluate our risks and whatever, and that's one of them. But like what kind of the conclusion that we came to, and I think like this is maybe a good sniff test for, are you using generative AI in a way that's going to stand the test of time, is like, if Gen AI went up by a factor of 10 tomorrow, that would impact like the cost benefit ratio of our processes like 1%, because the way that we're leveraging AI, we're creating so much value, meaning like being able to develop software 10 times faster than you previously were able to. You're replacing 90% of the hours of a human's time, which is just like astronomically more expensive than whatever you're going to spend on the tokens, right? Like the tokens are fractions of a percent if you're getting an AI to spit them out versus if you're having a human sit there and type them individually in terms of code or whatever. And so like if your business, like if AI 5X's and your business will, go under, like not to say that it's not a good business, but it's more of a risk, right?
I think most businesses will get that benefit though. I mean, because there's very few companies out there that are just, GPT wrappers or
Right.
those things. So overall, again, going back to what would you tell your mom, each advance is a good thing, like 100%. I think the risk ultimately isn't the technology, it's the people in leadership positions oftentimes making decisions on what they're going to do with the technology and how does that relate to the people in their companies. And there is the idea of some, especially developers, having a negative impact from AI, not because they're not getting the leverage from it, but the expectations put upon them. So they're expected to produce way more than even what the tools can enable them to output. And so that causes a net negative. Or you have a lot of stuff, again, like customer success, like chatbots and stuff. Everyone's like, oh, the chatbot's just better. And now that we can start doing voice and these other things, we'll just do that. And look at all this money we're saving. And look at these benefits because customers are getting resolved so much faster. But again, you're missing the point of like, do your customers actually want to deal with a chatbot? Or are they really wanting to make a connection with the person? And then when they go to make a later, purchase decision, are they going like, I'd actually just like to talk to a human?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder too, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but the skill of the user. Mm-hmm. And it almost goes back to the buyer beware concept of if you've got a really skilled person talking to a customer support or, talking to some chat that's trying to sell them or talking to some chat that's trying to help them develop, if they can smell out bullshit, then you're going to have a very successful model. But if you've got someone that's a much more inexperienced user on hand, they are going to, a lot of times, as we do in our markets, is they're just going to trust, the seller or the producer of content. And if that seller's selling them shit, then you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be consuming shit, whether that's code or, the right, troubleshooting response or a product or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think philosophically, I've thought a lot about AI and humans, and obviously as a developer, right? Developers seem to be particularly kind of sensitive right now, just because you can totally see when you go to ChatGPT and you say write me some code and it spits it out. You're like, that's what I used to do. I used to be the only person that could do that, and now there's an internet product that can do it. But I think philosophically, I think the conclusion that I've kind of come to is, short of another quantum leap in the capabilities of AI, I don't really see if there are jobs that, number one, can be directly replaced with AI, they were probably very low leverage jobs in the first place, right? And people probably didn't enjoy doing them. But like, I think, let's take development, right? The direction that I see AI having an impact on development is, in my opinion, not the direction of it's going to make it easier for people who know nothing about code to outcompete people that know everything about code. Like, I don't think that's the direction. I think it is those individuals that have a higher level understanding about their architecture, about their goals, about the way that the systems as a whole are interacting. They're going to become more empowered because they don't have to do the low leverage, like individual contributor level tasks, because they have access to an AI to do those things. So like, how does that translate more generally into the world as a whole? Like, yeah, maybe you're not going to be a customer service representative, or you're not going to be a first level customer service representative anymore. Like, where you're getting on the phone with an AI or with a person, and you're like taking their name and like their account number and like what's your main concern or whatever. Like, maybe you're having an AI do that. Maybe you're not solving, if you're at a call center, there's probably some types of calls that you get 50 of a day and you just have to do them, right? Maybe you don't have to do those anymore. But like, now maybe you are sitting there taking routed calls, and instead of where, pre-AI, you would have gotten 50 password reset calls and 25 I need to restart, and maybe 3 interesting calls a day, where you actually had to use your brain and like problem solve for a person. Now maybe you're getting all of those calls, right? And so you got to be on your game. And those customer service people that are just pros at working with people and making them feel good and solving their issues, or they're creative about whatever, like, they're going to rise to the top. And so it's almost like you have to be more skilled at your craft if you're, going to continue to be relevant, basically.
But it goes back to, again, what does the entry look like for that? Like we were talking about software developers. I just read a book. Who is Michael Ovitz? He was the founder of CAA, one of the largest talent agencies thing. And he talked about when he started, everybody started in the mailroom. It didn't matter if you were some high, like the boss's son or nephew or something like that. Eventually, everyone kind of made their way, but you had to start in the mailroom. And from that, you got a lot of general knowledge about the companies, their customer bases, how things actually operate, where things go, because at the time, again, the mailroom was everything. This was before email and all of those components. So if we change the entry point to where you don't get a lot of reps in building your skill level up on all these transitionary things, and the expectation is a higher skill gap needed, then you have this large gap from where someone who knows nothing to need to get to the point where they can actually start doing this for some monetary gain might be too large. And so again, it works good for people already in the system, but how do you kind of fill that churn as people like fall off, retire, move to other things? How do you keep your workforce actually stable? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people aren't thinking about when they're just looking at the benefits of what like agents can do for AI systems.
Computers have been like this like forever. Computers are really good at logical, critical thinking. They're now even just like that much better. What humans are still always really good at is more of the emotional and, the creative thinking too as well. So I think that's just going to amplify
user empathy
is
going to be more and more important. And I think too, like, because there's always the counterbalance to that argument of like AI is going to make it so that you got to be a better software engineer in order to like compete, is like, well, I can go to ChatGPT, or I can go, there's a million now like Node.js Insta app builders where it's just a GPT wrapper and it builds you a Node.js website, and that's great. But like, and I was curious kind of your thoughts on this, Devon. I almost see those as, if you talk about competitive markets, right? And where you have different, individuals that are trying to compete against each other to have the best solution or whatever. I almost think they're like different markets. Like if you're just, it's kind of like WordPress was back in the day, where it's like, did WordPress like impact the lives of the average developer? Not really, because all it did was make it so that people that were developing static informational websites now didn't have to do so. And now that was just like, that kind of just like broke off as a submarket. And that's no longer like software development. That's just like your landing page, And I think like there might be an element to that where it's like, yes, you can now build like small Node.js apps and whatever, like with, one prompt, they're going to build it all from you from scratch, and then you can iterate and whatever. And you might be able to get to like some fidelity of a website, and you might be able to make money on it. You might be able to do cool stuff. I mean, people did absolutely crazy shit with Excel without knowing how to code, right? You can make a GUI in Excel. But I think like maybe what I'm thinking about is that like you're never going to outcompete, like at this point in time, until like there's another quantum leap in AI. You're not going to outcompete like John Carmack at programming if you don't know anything about it. Like you're not even going to touch, trying to put a dent in the best software engineers in the world using AI. They're just going to be in another league, basically.
Yeah, are you talking about like, as our available technologies grow, like our ability to do things grow and do cooler fucking things grow and, get more into hardware and more like, and we'll be looking back 10 years from now and being like, oh, that stuff was so like basic.
So it's like punch cards.
Yeah, yeah.
Punch cards.
Definitely. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited, like, I hope, like, right now humans have to connect with screens so much. Like, I'm very excited if AI could, like, get us off that trend a little more by stuff is just, like, working in the background, or it's more voice, or it's, some other form of interaction with technology that's less kind of addictive, and who knows, maybe it'll be more addictive. I mean, we're always just looking for sensation. So
I saw a new product recently. It was a social media network, but there was no real people on it. Your entire following was bots. So you would just post stuff, and then all your comment sections and stuff would be bots commenting.
Were they just hyping you up, or do they troll you like if you post some dumb shit, or?
There might be a mix. I don't know. I think it was all to like basically make yourself feel like a celebrity in some sense. And
that's cool. I like it. Just like flip it on its head.
That'd be great.
I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in, Devon, to kind of riff off of that, because I am like, and I've heard the joke before, like you can tell the difference between a tech worker and a tech enthusiast because you walk into a tech enthusiast's house and they have Wi-Fi blinds and a smart toaster and whatever. And you walk into a tech worker's house and they have a printer and then a gun next to it in case the printer starts acting up and they want to be able to knock it out. And I'm kind of like in that camp of like, I am generally more skeptical about consumer level tech, let's say. And I think there is a big branch there between enterprise or scientific technology versus consumer level technology. But I'm very excited about like, how can we use AI to down select the amount of information that we're interacting with so that, because right now, the average person, let's say, spends, I would say like 2 hours a day on social media is probably a low estimate for the average American, but like let's go with that for now. If you're on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter, they're all relatively short posts. I don't know. Let's put a number of like 1,000. Like you're probably,
I think it's tens of thousands of pieces of content a day.
Per day. Okay. Tens of thousands. We're not meant to do that. And like what percentage of those, like at the end of the day, like your head hits the pillow or, you're hanging out with your family, right? Which is what's really important. What percentage of those 10,000 pieces of information that you took in were actually like, would you be like, yeah, I'm glad. Like I'm really glad that I read that post or that, because it's not zero, right?
Yeah.
And like it's kind of a fool's errand to be like, we need to abolish all social media and whatever. It's like the entrenchment right now is just so deep that, it is what it is. But it's like, if I have an AI instead, or emails, right? I get like, as soon as your email is out there as part of a company that has raised venture funds, like get ready for the email influx, because you'll just get a bunch of them. And it's hard because like I have customers and real people that email me, and then I have to like sort it out from all this stuff. I'm looking forward to the day when we have like AIs that just know, like Hunter likes this type of content. Like he wants to hear about woodworking. He wants to hear about AI. He hates like slanted troll articles about the flavor of the week. I hate getting sales emails, cold sales emails, whatever. And like, I just want an AI to take care of filtering all the noise. And I just want to get the like 5 things a day that I actually need.
Yeah. But then you're confirming the algorithm. You're only seeing what you want to see, and you're not seeing a full picture of the world too.
Yeah. And there definitely needs to be like, I don't know how that is. But right now, the status quo is that like some social media company whose profits are tied with getting you to see more content, that's like the decision-making process right now. And like, could I get an AI to give me a perfectly accurate picture of all the information that I want? Probably not. But would it be better than like Facebook deciding what I should see? Like almost certainly.
I wager you're going to have an AI, because we're getting to the point where these AI agents can mimic human voices. And this is a common thing. Like Google did a demo a while back about them making an haircut appointment for you. And so you're going to have a point where you have these AI agents calling to do things for you. But most likely you're going to have an AI agent do the answering for the business or whomever's doing that. So you're just going to have agents talking to agents talking to agents. Mm-hmm. And at that point, because of the velocity in which that information can travel, the amount of emails being written, the amount of phone calls being made, the amount of requests happening,
the matrix will overload.
Yeah, you're straight up going to just need to have that handle things for you, because like I already don't answer my phone most of the time because it's random bots.
100%.
Like I said, our emails have very, very advanced spam filtering needed now. And I truly I can't get on Instagram because their ads are so good that they make me start wanting things. Like all of a sudden I want a new jacket or a new pair of shoes because they know in my lizard brain exactly what I find cool, and they will just keep blasting that in front of me. And so, it's just going to get better.
Yeah, what is up with that? I'm like, we're so far off topic, but like not even my mom calls me anymore. I get texts from my mom, and it's like, nobody calls each other anymore. It's like all.
My dad calls me because he's not he's not very good with texting. So my mom actually controls the text for the number, and then my dad only calls me. So it's at that point.
I mean, honestly, like, and this is something Devon, you and I have talked about in the past of like, there might be one thing that I kind of have some hope for too with AI is, I say let's flood the internet. I mean, not let's, like, I'm not going to be out there like generating content, but like, I'm not going to be that upset if in 5 years people don't go on Facebook anymore because it's just all, bot generated content. And instead they socialize with other people that they're physically located near. Like, would that be a bad thing? I don't think so. Or like if we go back to, getting our news on a print piece of paper that actually like I think there's an element too of like a barrier to entry, right? So like you talk about calling or versus texting. And like, I think one of the things, I get a lot of texts and like not all of them are super relevant. And part of it is like, it's so easy, right? It's so easy just to send a text, to just like reach out versus like, if you're going to write someone a letter, right? You got to sit down, you got to get a piece of paper, you got to write it out. Your hand cramps a bunch because you don't write letters very much anymore. You got to find a stamp, send it, whatever. And like newspapers, I think are the same way. Like, do I think news was better when it was journalistic organizations that, held an ethic about what is journalism and sourcing and whatever? And like, did they get it perfect? No, but was news generally better when you had to have access to a printing press and print it on a piece of newspaper and then have delivery boys take it out to everybody? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think like
Yeah,
we
you
might
couldn't
kind of
customize
recenter.
it. Yeah.
The other thing of this, again, we're just going down random rabbit holes now. But going back to that Roman time, the guy that Lex Friedman had, Greg Altreat, again, I've been reading his book, and they were talking about the amount of influence that an emperor actually had on the empire itself. So an emperor had on it. And if you were in Rome and you wanted to send a note to Judea, it would take 1 to 2 months to get there, and they would take 1 to 2 months to get back. So even if you wanted to control things, the amount of influence you had was super small. So everything got delegated and relegated to the people who were actually local to it. But the fact that, again, now we can message somebody across the world instantaneously completely changes the dynamic. And you can easily see, again, with the amount of outputs and influence you can have with these AI agents moving at a much, much higher speed, the amount of control that, again, a centralized thing like a company or whatever can have on an individual. So I think we're all just kind of wanting to go back to a slower pace, smaller pods, less coercion of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
an
mean,
interesting point.
it's a reality that, like, you know, if you have your phone on you, which most people do most of the time, so Tanner, if you have your phone on you and I have your phone number, I have the capability to pretty much at any time, day or night, you know, unless you're sleeping, I have the ability to insert a thought into your thought pattern right now, and you have no choice. Because you get a text message, it's impossible to not like think about it. And it doesn't matter what you were doing, if you were watching the sunset or, you know, woodworking, or you were writing a great song, or you're tattooing, right? Or drawing something and you're in the flow. Like, if you have your phone near you in a place that you're going to see it, or, you know, I do a lot of audiobooks, and like, I don't know why, but I have Siri read my notifications as they come in. I should probably turn that off. But yeah, I can just like insert a thought into your brain because I want to. Mm-hmm. And that's like pretty nuts, actually, if you think about it. Like,
and depending on your relationship, you can get angry at him if he doesn't respond in 5 minutes.
And that is crazy.
Like my wife, who will just send me follow-up question marks in 5 minutes if I don't respond.
The other thing of that is like the location thing. I know a lot of people who share their phone location, so at any moment they would know exactly where you are and what you're doing. So again, like going back, like my great-great-grandfather who would have to walk 10 miles to the next town to go do some business or something like that, his wife wouldn't know where he was at. I mean, kind of, but not specifically for probably 3-4 days, because it was like a multiple day deal.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, you're not responding to their, like, what do you want for dinner text, or, what, some random thing,
Yeah. Like back in the day when you were, frontier days, you would aim to meet somebody at this pass next winter, so you just show up and you're like, hopefully they do too. I don't know. I'll be here for a couple months, and then eventually I'll assume they died and go back home. But like, yeah. Anyways, I am pretty hopeful. Like to bring us back to kind of the topic at hand, and I think we've stayed fairly on topic, because I just wanted to talk about like what, again, to Devon's mom, or to my mom, if you're listening to this. I wanted to kind of hash out like, what are the impacts on AI, and how is that going, or how is somebody who, I'm not writing articles for profit, I'm just like working in the space, what are my thoughts on how it's going to impact society? And like, mostly speaking, I'm pretty hopeful. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah. I remember the first time I met your mom, she was wearing one of these t-shirts that, I don't know if you can see, it says "Never Code Alone," one of our original mantras. And she just like put her finger over the alone, so it just says never code. And it was like, yep, that's my mom.
Yep.
Still asking me about like, should I open this email?
Yep. Code Buddy Moms. Never
Code Buddy. Yeah, we were going to make a t-shirt, weren't we?
Yeah, we were.
Code Buddy Moms, never code. All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, good combo, guys. And if anyone's listening still to the end, Devon's mom, Hunter's mom, my mom, thank you for doing so.
Yeah.
She won't know how to listen to this, so I'm safe.
Yeah. Well,
Sounds good.
All right. We'll catch everybody next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.